I'm feeling pretty stupid. I got a lot more sun today than I meant to. But I was thinking while driving for work about one of the books that I recently started titled Five Broken Blades. I only picked it up because I wasn't a fan of the book A Broken Blade. I have explained my issues with that book on a video already. So I picked up Five Broken Blades because I figured, if one broken blade was not well done, maybe five will be more readable. And so far it is. I like ensemble casts, and I like casts where each of the characters has their own agenda. Kill the Farm Boy was an example of one where everyone had pretty much the exact same goal. It didn't work as well as I'd liked it to have. Among Thieves was one where everyone has their own goal, but they also have their main shared goal, and that one felt alright, but the main character of that, and there was a clear main character even with the perspectives changing, was a bit too similar to the archetype of characters I don't like, such as I saw in A Broken Blade. I say all that because the book that I'm going to be ranting about today is another book with a pretty large cast, and each of them has one primary goal, but there is, to a degree, their own goals mixing into that pot. And the book I'm talking about is this: Black Leopard, Red Wolf. Hi, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another book rant. I first picked this book up back in 2021, I want to say. I had seen it on the shelves before, and I liked the cover art. Let's get that again. The cover illustration is by Pablo Gerardo Camacho. The cover design by Helen Yentis. This is copyright 2019, so like I said, 2 years old. I purchased this for $18. So yeah, I picked this up at Bookworks in Albuquerque, and at the time I also bought a couple other books. I believe it was February, and so this was on a shelf about black authors. I picked up a book written by one of my friend's spouses. It's on the shelf behind me. I still haven't read that book because the kind of book it is not the kind of book I usually read, but I purchased it in support of my friend's wife. And so I had Black Leopard, Red Wolf sitting on my shelf for a while, and then in 2022, at the end of the year, I purchased Temper from a bookstore in Colorado in Denver, and then read that in March of, I want to say early April of 2023. So the itch that I wanted scratched was a African or African American author writing from a African storytelling style, a style that I have not really read before because a lot of books are written from a very Anglo perspective or Anglo style. I ended up being able to scratch that itch with Temper, so I held on to Black Leopard, Red Wolf for another year. And in 2024, my ex and I wanted to kind of have a book club to ourselves, and so during the summer of 2024, we read Black Leopard, Red Wolf. I'm putting that up again. And in this case, she understood I read much quicker than her. She ended up having to finish it with an audiobook, and that she was able to finish relatively quickly. This is a long book. Usually I don't read things that are 620 pages. Five Broken Blades is pretty long, and that's like 500 something, 450-ish, 460 pages. So 600 pages is a really long book for anything I'm reading. But it's separated into segments. each, let's see, I think it's 6 different segments in this story, and each one focuses on kind of a different snippet of time within this overall quest. And I have mixed feelings about the book because the primary antagonist is written in such a way that she appears to be a protagonist for much of the story, and the antagonist, her antagonist, is basically everyone in existence that isn't female. So she is gathering a bunch of people, specialists, to help hunt down a kidnapped prince, a prince of a daughter in the royal family that is alleged to have been the heir to the throne, but she was kicked out by men. And there's kind of a theme there. The witch ends up gathering all of these specialists, including the perspective character, whose name is Tracker. He doesn't really get a name in the book, I don't recall, at least, but he has a role. And his role is that he has a really powerful and acute sense of smell. If a person is still alive, he can smell that person and track them down. And so he has his own backstory, but by the time we meet him in the main part of the story, he is a mercenary who takes tracking jobs and has a bit of a heroic streak to it. In his backstory, his maternal figure and he himself were sexually abused by I want to say the paternal figure in his life. And so he doesn't take any jobs that allow an abusive man to continue abusing a spouse. And we learn that throughout the story, that he basically will sometimes kill the person he's been hired by, or even help the person he's been hired to track down to get away from that abusive man. And so he does get a lot of people that aren't being abused and are just being hunted down for whatever reason, and Tracker tracks them and guides people to their location. So the witch hires him. She hires a few other characters, including one, the only name that really sticks out to me without flipping through the book again, is a character named Sadogo. And it's spelled as all one word, so I was pronouncing it Sadogo the entire time. And then eventually the background for the character reveals that his name is actually the word sad and the word for his kind of people. He's effectively like a mutant, but in a way that a lot of others are born. So the term for his kind of person is Ogo. And they tend to tear the womb of their mother when they are being born, and the mother always dies in childbirth. He can't experience love because his size, both as a person, he is several meters tall, but as a man, he can't use his junk because it is too big for any woman alive. And Ogos are usually used for their size in arenas to basically serve in blood sport ways. Sadogo is one of the more intelligent Ogo, and because of that, he's also one of the more emotionally intelligent, and something happens in his backstory that causes him to just be in a depressed state. So he is still a muscle. He is still muscle for hire, but he is sad Ogo. And that kind of character writing and the character, the background for Tracker is something I really appreciated about the book. But the actual plot was too meandering and too convoluted, and I wasn't fond of the way the antagonist worked. So, the witch, her story keeps on changing, but the Tracker eventually learns that the prince is effectively the bastard child to a daughter of the royal family, and allegedly the former king chose that daughter to be his heir because none of his sons were competent. One of those sons was able to wrest the throne from her and exiled her to a monastery where only women are allowed to be. At some point, she ended up taking a lover, like sneaking in a lover and having this son as her child. And the son had to be removed from the monastery because men aren't allowed, but also he was kidnapped by a vampiric creature, and they were effectively traveling the land by these many gates where once you progress through them, you have to progress through them in a particular order. You can't go backwards through it without some magical repercussion. And the witch that hired them is asking Tracker to hunt this kid down by providing something with the kid's scent on it. And everywhere they go, more complications happen. My issue is that the witch is she hates all men because of, in her centuries of life, every time she has been mistreated, it has been by a powerful man. And to a degree that is sympathetic, but the way she takes it out, her rage, on everyone, regardless of whether or not she hired them, or they are good people, or even their sexual attraction, is just incredibly obnoxious and tedious to read. But then she also hates the gay characters because they are a man who is in love with men, and that is even worse, more evil in her mind. And so she ends up selling, at one point in the story, they end up catching up to the kidnapped boy and are able to rescue him, but they were able to do so by catching him in a place where women are in charge. And it turns out that men are either used as slaves to be sexually abused or workers that are all eunuchs. And the characters are imprisoned in different ways or tortured in other ways. And throughout it all, the witch that hired them has run off with a kid, but to do that, she has to misuse the trust that, what little trust the mercenaries have for the witch. She has to abuse it and traps them in a really terrible way. And so what they were hired to do was to bring this kidnapped child to his mother. And so when they are able to get free, they spend their effort trying to catch up to this boy. And eventually they turn away from the path, and the climax happens, and the vampiric creature comes back, and the story continues. But what I don't like about it is the way the witch is written. Just, I don't like that kind of character because it's kind of, in my eyes, contradictory. She doesn't trust any men, but she also will hire them to do the job for her. And then because she doesn't trust any man, she'll also leave them to be abused and traumatized because, she's been traumatized and abused by men, so surely men deserve it. And it's just an attitude I don't like reading in my antagonists. It's too contradictory, it's too hypocritical, and it is nuanced in a certain way that was fun to read. But I don't think I'm ever going to reread Black Leopard, Red Wolf. It was a good book, and I enjoyed it, but I don't think I'll ever read it again. And I don't think I'll ever read the follow-up, which is from the perspective of that witch. Now, it could be that her perspective makes her more noble, or the actions of the men, the mercenaries she hires to be more evil or more sinister in ways that Tracker wasn't aware of, but it just doesn't seem like the sort of thing I want to read. So, yeah, I liked Black Leopard, Red Wolf. It was an interesting read for the summer of last year, but like I said, I'm not going to read it again. I spent $18 on it, and it was pretty good. So, money well spent, I'd say. But, like I said, I'm not going to read it again. And the $9 credit I'll get when putting it back into the used book system is going to be just as good because I might get another book that is as fun or even more fun. So, yeah, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another book rant.